This episode is sponsored by David Davies of Sun Life Financial. For all your financial advice needs, call David at 519-660-6798 or email david.davies@sunlife.com. Book your appointment today and get started on achieving your financial goals. And by Nick Davies, Andrea Davies, and their team at Homology Real Estate Group make the buying and selling of real estate as cost-effective, informative, and straightforward as possible while maintaining the highest level of service. If you want to maximize your home's value, call Homology Real Estate Group today. Alrighty, Peter. Today, going back to the hockey route again. Surprise, surprise, but nothing wrong with that. We've got lots of friends in the hockey community, so it's nice to catch up with them. Gonna stick in the Chicago Blackhawks. A little bit of London Knights, a little bit of Chicago Blackhawks today with our guest. But before we get to who's on the show today and to get to that guest, talking to Jim McKellar, take us through. Obviously, you've had a long kind of interaction, a long relationship with Jim. He's working with the Chicago Blackhawks organization. That the team has been, I don't want to say surprising this year, but especially with the news at the start of the year with them losing, Jonathan Taves and other players along the line. There was a lot of talk of how good are the Hawks going to be this year. They're having a pretty good season.
Yes, they are. They're having a very good season, and Pat Kane is not showing his age at all. He's up there in the scoring race. I have an interesting story about Pat, if you want to hear it.
I always enjoy a good Pete James story. You know that.
Well, when Pat was drafted by the London Knights, I had him on the air with me as an interview in the playoffs. And I said to him, and that, of course, was the spring of the year, I said, "Are you going to come to the team next year?" He said, "I don't know if I'm big enough to play in the OHL." Well, he stood out like a giant, and he came in the fall and played with the London Knights and was here 1 year and then gone to the NHL. That's how good this young man was. Size didn't mean anything.
1 year, 145 points, I believe it was.
Like that. Yeah, I remember talking to his dad, too. We were in Plymouth, and the old man his name was Pat, too. He was fretting a little bit about my son and this and that. And I said, "Pat, settle down." I said, "Your son is not only going to play our game well, he's going to play it with distinction." And then he went on to the records that he has.
And the other factor too is the fact that that connection in the community, and we've talked about the fact that that's kind of how hockey in general works. You've seen a lot of former London Knights become. We've talked about when we talked with Jim a little bit about going into NHL success, but there's been a lot of former London Knights that have gone on to play for the Chicago Blackhawks, and that's when it comes to the connection piece too, right?
Yeah, that's true. It's been a good lifeline for a lot of the kids to go to Chicago, and of course they're playing with an original six team, and I think that internally does something for a kid. People who've gone to the Maple Leafs have said, "Wow, I'm going to an original six team," or the Montreal Canadiens or Detroit, even though they're having their tough times now. Playing with an original six has got to mean something.
All right, Peter, let's get to our guest today. He's Jim McKellar. He's been you've rode the buses and the roads with him many a times in his role as assistant GM with the London Knights. He's moved on to be initially an amateur scout. Now he is the head Eastern Canadian scout for the Chicago Blackhawks. Any good Jim McKellar stories before we get to the interview, Pete?
No, not really. Jimmy was a good guy. He was fun to be around, and I don't think we ever crossed swords. He was always very professional about his outlook, and that's all I ever asked for, being the media, was the professionalism, and Jimmy had that in spades.
He is a super friendly, super easygoing guy, but as you'll learn, if you don't know the process, you need to learn. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim McKellar, and a good friend of both yours and mine. This is the funny situation, Peter. Usually I ask for all of your interesting stories with a guest. I actually have an interesting Jim McKellar story, and it consists of me being completely and totally scared of him. We'll get to it later on.
Okay.
Jim may remember this. He may not. I'm not sure, but it's one that still sticks in my brain from my less lengthy broadcast career than yours. But Jim, first and foremost, thanks for doing this, and good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you guys. Nice to be on. Thanks for having me here.
Well, you're the head Eastern scout for the Chicago Blackhawks now. And what do you scout? What's out there to look at?
Well, the Quebec League is going right now. They're playing in sort of a protected environment, they're calling it. So I watch all those games. I also have been watching, we have streaming services that we can watch all the games of the players like Brendan Ottman from Flint and Mason McTavish, Logan Mayhew, Francesco Pinelli, are all playing over in Europe that are OHL kids. So any OHL guys that have gone overseas. And then a smattering of European players. I've been watching a lot of Finland this year, and we make sure that we keep a regular schedule because eventually we're going to have a draft. So we just, whoever's playing, we keep watching. But I personally concentrate on kids from the Ontario Hockey League that are playing overseas, and then the Quebec League, because those are kids that are under my direction.
When is the draft, or what are you going to do? Is there going to be a draft?
Isn't that the golden question right now?
The plan, the date set out by the NHL is July 23rd and 24th. I know there's been lots of discussion in the media about changing it, but I haven't heard anything related to a change. So we're planning to have a draft, and we operate like we did last year. It was an unusual year with the October draft. We just continue to operate and interview and view players and watch games, and we talk and develop a list for whenever they give us the date. We're hoping it's July 23rd, and we'll be ready to go that day. So
you have a big scouting staff, I see, too. I mean, there's lots of guys in Europe scouting for your club.
Yeah, I mean, it's become a world game, as you guys know. You see with the Knights, certainly in the local OHL teams, there's kids from all over the world. So we have scouts in the U.S., Canada. We have a scout in Russia. We have a scout in Sweden, a couple guys in Sweden, actually, a guy in Finland and a guy in the Czech Republic. And we want to make sure that they cover all the countries, because you look at what's happening with German hockey. There's a lot of Germans coming over now. So you got to make sure you have guys there, and Swiss players. We have 2 guys from Switzerland on our team. So we want to make sure it's a world game. So we have a world staff, and we have a good group directed by Mark Kelly, who lives in the Detroit area, and he oversees all of us. So there'd be about 10 or 11 of us that talk regularly to put it all together. But Mark Kelly heads it up.
I notice you have a guy named Rob Fata on your scouting team. Is that any relation to the Fata that played here?
It's Rob Faka. It's actually, he is a London kid, and his dad is Bob Faka. And
I know Bob.
Yeah. Faka Fasteners in town. Well known. Bob did the walk across Ontario. And yes, Rob is a London native and went to high school here, and then played in Aylmer and played junior B in the area, was a very good player. And then he went off to university and went to University of Nebraska, Omaha, and he stayed. He went into coaching, and yeah, he's a London native and a great part of our staff. He's the head U.S. scout for us. He gets back, and his family, Bob and Wendy Faka, mom and dad, live right here in London and operate Faka Fasteners. So.
Oh yeah, I know Bob. I know. I know the father was involved in pro soccer at one stage.
Now, Jim, for those who don't know, take us back. When did you kind of, obviously we know your involvement with the Knights going back a ways, sort of thing. When did you get into the game, and you don't just all of a sudden decide you go, I'm gonna be a scout.
Well, you know what? I started. I went to college in Lambton College in Sarnia, and at the time, the Sarnia Sting had just moved to Sarnia. So in their inaugural season, I went to games. I was a college student. I was interested. Didn't get any opportunity to do any work for them in 94, 95, but in 95, 96, I got hired as an intern while I was in my final year of college. And basically I worked for Joe Bronzy. I was the director of marketing there, and he hired me to and actually Lee Cunningham, another name that you guys would know from the broadcasting field. I worked with Lee, and I helped those two with daily while I was in school, I learned game nights and how it all operated. And then I moved from there. At the end, when I graduated, I was hired by Joe to be the marketing and public relations coordinator. And then at that time, Mark Hunter was coach and GM for 3 of the 5 years I was in Sarnia. So got to know him, and he really introduced me, and I credit my whole career to Mark, basically. He introduced me to the hockey. I mean, I played hockey, but I wanted to work at it, and I had to take the time to learn it from him. And he allowed me. He said, "Hey, I'm heading to Windsor tonight. Do you want to come?" I jump in the truck with him. We drive down and pre-scout the night before. He said, "Hey, we're having a scouting meeting. We need somebody to organize the computer work. Can you do that?" Yes. This is back in Sarnia, my first and second year, early on. Hey, we're going on the road. We don't have anybody to order the food. Can you order the food? Yeah. Can you do the tickets? And he just continued to add responsibility to. At that time, I was marketing and public relations coordinator, and to be able to, be added to the hockey staff essentially. Then scouting, he said, "Hey, we don't have anybody going to Detroit. Do you mind covering Detroit for us?" So working in Sarnia, I'd run down to Detroit area games and watch AAA Bantam at the time and do reports. So he introduced me to it. So that's the sort of the beginning. And then obviously we had a good time. He went off to St. John's to coach in the American League. Then he came back and we continued to work. He came back as GM and he added more and more responsibility in Sarnia. And then when he left, shortly after, maybe 6 months later, I left the Sting, and then he bought the Knights, and he said, "Hey, we bought the Knights. Would you be interested in being our assistant GM?" And I moved to London, and the rest has sort of been. I was 11 years with them, and it's been great. So I owe a lot of it to the start and the current situation to Mark. So.
Well, he got full value for his investment. You worked very hard, and I know you wore a lot of hats around the place. I did a column once on about Jim McKellar, and I said, don't give him a new hat. If you're going to give him a gift, don't give him a new hat. He's already got lots of those.
But I found Peter with Mark and Dale. Obviously, began the organization. I was hired 2 weeks after they got the team, and I was sort of their first hire, I guess. There was a trust factor, and I think it went both ways. I trusted Mark that he would give me opportunity, but he would also give me responsibility and accountability. And he taught me a lot of things that I use today. Every single day when I go to work now, I have Mark Hunter in my attitude and how I approach things. And I learned a lot about we worked together on a lot of things, but he also taught me a lot of things. And I hope to think that I helped him with some stuff along the way as well. But he's certainly my mentor, and he's been a great part of my career, and I owe the fact that I'm in the National Hockey League to Mark and to Dale for that opportunity. And it was a great 11 years. I mean, Peter, you and I rode the bus many times together and sat close to each other and had lots of chats, and those newspapers passing around and chatting stories, and those are great memories and things that I know you and Mike really enjoyed, and we enjoyed having you. And it's a fun part of the game. And so I was 11 years of that. And then in 2010, I was called by the Hawks. They had a guy move from Niagara Falls down to the U.S. They lost their in Ontario, and they said, "Hey, we need a little bit of coverage. Would you be interested in joining us as part-time covering Ontario?" I could still be assistant GM in London. So I went to Mark, and he said, "Yeah, go ahead. That's a great opportunity. Make sure you do your stuff with the Knights, but that's great. I know you want to work in the NHL sometime." So I give them credit. They said, "Hey, we're going to let you do it." So they gave me the reins to kind of build my scouting resume, in addition to what we went through with the Knights at the National Hockey League level. Now I was able to lead the Knights to go to meetings. I was able to, do my responsibilities with the Knights, but also learn the trade. So for that year, 2010-11, I was part-time. And then at the end of at the draft, I was driving home from the draft, and my current boss, Mark Kelly, called me and said, "Hey, we'd like to offer you full-time. Make sure you talk to Mark and Dale and explain, the situation." So they were very good with communication. I talked to Mark and Dale in July. It was around July 1st at that time. And they were awesome about it. And we worked out a transition. So I left late August, and I still feel like I never really left. I'm sort of I jokingly say the old board of directors, sort of I get a call from Mark on a regular basis. And we've been friends for a long, long time, 25 years. And as you say, when you have a connection and a mentor like that, you're going to stay in touch. And we talk regularly, probably 3 times a week, all the time since I've been gone. And I stop in and argue with those guys every once in a while. And I've loved watching their success since I left. And it's always going to be a part of my life for sure.
I know at one point, Jim, and I will reference a good friend of both of ours, Natalie Wakabayashi, who was kind of, I know she saw you as the mentor because you were kind of helping her out. And then as you left the team, she kind of took some additional, but she always said to me, she goes, if you ever, if the one thing that you got to ask Jim all the time about is the fact that he keeps the London Knights NHL All-Star team lists for the fact that former London Knights that are playing in the league, you're still keeping a pretty good track of even the kids from when you were assistant GM to when they're in the league, where they're at. Does that list still live somewhere that you know full well?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Those kids, I mean, I say kids, they're grown men now, but all the players that played for the Knights during your time there, they felt, in my case, I was fairly young when I was started this, and they all felt like little brothers, to be honest. And a lot to see them grow up. And I know, Peter, you've been around many of them on the bus, and they grow up from being teenagers and learning the game. They need some mentors and some friends along the way. And I like to think that I was that. And I know Chris Matten and Don Brankley, who, Pat left us a few years ago, played a role in helping these kids along the way. And I think that bond and friendship is always there. I've been fortunate, some highlights for me is to see some of these guys go through and have great accomplishments in all facts of life. I've gone to weddings for players. I've been a part of, 1,000th game ceremonies for players and attending those as a guest. And those are cherished memories for myself, and certainly things that I will not forget from those days of, and now you can turn on every night. You watch, last night I watched the Leaf game, and they have, John Tavares playing, and they have, you can tune into Colorado and Nazem Kadri's playing, or Corey Perry's playing for Montreal, or Josh Anderson. It goes on and on. There's a lot of great London Knights in the NHL, and, I was proud to be affiliated with some of them during my time there, for sure.
You mentioned an interesting point, Jimmy. A lot of people forget that these are only kids when they come here. They're boys, just 16 years old, 17 years old, and they need a mentor. They needed someone like you and Brankley and the late Don Brankley to help them along in life as well as
and the coaching staff too. I will say, the Knights do a great job of having assistant coaches. I know Dylan Hunter and Rick Stedman are mentors, because we're dealing with some of the kids that we've acquired, like Alec Regula and Adam Boquist, since I left the Knights. They've continued that. I mean, Rick Stedman's impact and Dylan Hunter's impact on these young men, and obviously Dale and Mark have a great. But there's a number of guys. They've done a great job of surrounding themselves with support people, as you say, Peter, that really provide a mentorship and a friendship to help these kids deal with. They're moving away from home for the first time. They're going to go to a brand new school, new friends. They're trying to figure out where they're going to be in the lineup, learn a new system. And by the way, on Friday night, there's going to be 9,000 people there to watch you play. So those kind of pressures are things that they obviously going to lean on their parents, but absent of their parents being in town, they need some people. And Chris Matten, I think, is one of the hidden gems of the London Knights. And he's one that he's a friend, he's a brother, he's a supporter. And Dylan Hunter and Rick Stedman would fit into that category as well. And I know current assistant GM Rob Simpson has been that for so many as well. He's done a great job since he took over. So they've continued it, and it's an important part of junior hockey. It really is.
Sure is. Yep.
Now, for those who don't know, especially, and I've had this conversation with people too, especially the assistant GM role, it is wide open. For those who maybe are sitting there going, looking at it going, all right, I get that the general manager kind of puts the team together. What's the assistant GM do? And I jokingly say to people, I'm like, everything, and it's more that other duties as assigned title.
Absolutely. I always thought my hat rack was I had a pretty full hat rack. There was,
Sure.
we always joked that there was a drive-through window that separated my office from Mark Hunter's office. We had a wall that connected us, and, every once in a while he would bellow something, "Hey, Jim," and I'd come over and it was something. But in a day-to-day standpoint, it's helping manage the team, helping make sure that all the process of paperwork, contracts, immigration, scouts are getting to games, scouts are getting reports in, organize meetings, organize a lot of the behind the scenes. You're basically the general manager and the coach's right-hand man for assisting with the process of making the team. You interact with the league a lot on various things. You're dealing with the doctors and the staff for the dental if there's any issues. You're also a liaison with the parents and agents and people that are, obviously involved in the kids and worried about their kids that are there. So you're basically another arm of the general manager to try to organize and keep the club together. I enjoyed every minute of it. It was a lot of fun. And the other part of my job, I was director of public relations at the time as well. And so I would deal with the media. I would deal with, handle, game nights and some of the responsibilities there, was a big part of it. And I think when you do those jobs, you learn so many different things that can help you along the way. And I've, certainly gone back and drawn on those experiences over the time. And I don't feel old. I'm 46, but it feels like I've got a lot. I've been at the game since I was 21. So, it's crazy to think that in 25 years, I've acquired, a lot of time in junior, but now I've been 10 years in the NHL, and I've learned a lot at all the levels and from all the people that I've worked with.
It's a fun job, isn't it, Jimmy?
It is. I always say, people ask me what's it like to work in hockey. And I said, well, it's like working in your hobby, your favorite. It's not a job. It is a job because you have responsibilities, but it's also something that I cherish because I enjoy it. It's my day to day is not, there's people with far more difficult jobs day to day than what I'm doing. And I never take that for granted. And I appreciate the opportunity that I have, but I also recognize that I work in sports. It's entertainment. It's, I'm not doing, what we're dealing with now with the pandemic and various things. There's a lot of people doing way more significant jobs than I'm doing. And I'm certainly aware of that.
You told me once when I asked you about the job, you said, well, I go to a hockey game every night and someone pays me to do it. And
that's absolutely right, Peter. And it's something that we're fortunate. I mean, we work in sports and, I go to a game. The only complaint I ever have, and it's very, very minimal, is in my job, I do travel a lot. So at times I miss my family when I'm away for long stretches, but that would be the absolute least of other people's worries. So no, I don't have a lot of complaints. I enjoy the job.
The traveling is part of the job. It's just like the players. They travel and they miss the family, I'm sure, every bit as much, but it's part of what you do.
Absolutely. It comes in the territory and you get used to the rhythm. And my daughter, who's grown up in this, all she's known is dad sort of traveling. So the last year has been kind of different for her. Be able to be home every single day. I've been home for a year, almost a year coming up on, and she's enjoyed that. So she's used to when dad has to leave on a Thursday night and might not be home till Sunday. And my wife and daughter deal with the travel and the routine very, very well. So it's been good.
Jim mentioned his time as obviously assistant GM, but director of public relations, which brings me, Peter, I have to throw in my story here.
Okay.
Jim got the pleasure of dealing with people who knew what they were doing, such as yourself, Mike, and Ryan Pyatt from the Free Press. A young, excited, pie-eyed young man comes in as he is a Fanshawe College student, which I'm come to learn now, Jim, was probably the most annoying part of the job at sometimes, because you get people walking in the door who were excited but didn't know what to do or how things worked.
Well, I can say, to be honest, Ryan, I thought you were great from the beginning. I mean, you had a good rapport. You were very your approach to it was very subtle and very. You weren't brash. You were very professional, and I think you handled it really well. And I think you learned. And I think if I look back to it, you remind me of when I began. I was a Lambton College student that was beginning too, and I tried to remind myself as often as I could that, hey, I was in this position too, and if I could help and be, some sort of assistance and understand that, hey, you're going to have questions along the way. Hopefully I did that. And obviously you've gone on to a good career in the business, and it's something I enjoyed. It was fun to deal with you.
It was funny because I think I don't remember who the Knights were playing. It was a Friday night. I got my first, okay, you can go down, you can cover the Knights game. I had no idea how post game worked. I tried to ask a couple people. I get down to the room. I don't know how it works. I guess I should have asked more questions.
Yeah.
Rob Schremp just comes out of the door, opens it up, sticks his head out, looks both ways, and says, "Somebody looking for me?"
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm like, "It's Rob Schremp. He scored twice tonight. Sure, yeah, come on over." And so I, proceed, to stick the microphone out. You do the recording, and somebody taps me on the shoulder halfway through and says, Jim said he needs to talk to you afterwards.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What? Okay, sure, no problem. And I walk over, and Jim just went out.
Yeah.
And I was like, "What? No, there's a process.
Yeah.
This is the way it goes. If you want an interview, you ask me first. I get them." And I was like, he just stuck his head out the door and said, "Anybody want me?" Nobody said. And I came to that point, Jim. You're like, okay, I understand. You're new. You don't know the process. This is how it works.
Yeah.
What else do you need for tonight? From now on, now you know the process. And I remember
Yeah.
sitting there going afterwards when Jim did the point and you're out, I was like,
Yeah.
I'm screwed.
Yeah, well, it's you know what, and I took no pleasure in that sort of situation either. It was those are always tough, and I think Peter touched on it earlier. And I'll give you the background maybe now. Behind a lot of that was a significant mandate from the organization to make sure the kids are talking to people. Make sure we know every person they're talking to, and that to help them sort of learn. So Rob is very gregarious and outgoing, and he would chat with everybody, and no harm to you because you would do a good job of interviewing him. But along the process, if we didn't follow the process, it really could get out of hand. Not for you, but for others that ask him questions that weren't helping his cause.
Well, the funniest part about it was eventually later on down the line, after spending about 9 years working with Peter, and then I took on a new job as a sports information coordinator. I now, in the back of my head, go, as much as you said, Mark and Dale and company helped you out. Now in situations where I've had to go to some national championships, and so
Yeah.
all of a sudden I've been like, now I know.
Yeah, and they're tough ones as you move along. I mean, it's part of it. And I learned it when I was in Sarnia because I was, sort of the same. I was doing things, and then somebody would tap me on the shoulder, same as you got tapped, and say, well, "That isn't how it goes." And I understand you're not doing anything negative, but you have to make sure that you follow the procedure. And I would go back and tail between my legs and go back to my office and say, "Okay, I got to get better. I got to do better." And yeah, so.
I remember the next week coming in and automatically I go upstairs, I come downstairs and walk over. I'm like, "Where's Jim?" I believe for the longest time it was Mr. McKellar because I realized I screwed up, so I didn't want to be. I was like,
yeah, I think but you
Mr.
were very
McKellar,
polite,
can I get so and so, so and so, and so and so? Thank you very much. I'll be over here.
Yeah, you were very polite, very subtle, very professional.
We were all young once. Even me, I was young once, and one of my first interviews was with Gordie Howe. Who in the day was God, he was Gordie Howe, and there I was with my little microphone and tape recorder and talking to Gordie Howe. How am I ever going to get through this? But Gordie sensed that. He sensed my newness, and he handled it very professionally, as you might expect from him. And I interviewed Gordie many times thereafter.
Now, Jim, interview-wise, there's been a few gems in that time from your Knights time. I know involved, especially there's a few guys who really liked a microphone or two. Was it hard to kind of control some of them?
No, not really, because I think there were some fun personalities. I mean, a lot of our captains over the years spoke very well. I mean, I think of Danny Sabret, who still lives in town. He was very articulate when he often was a good quote. Adam Dennis was a good quote often, and he'd served him well in his life. And those two stick out for me because they really, at the age of 19, were carrying themselves like they were 30 years old. They were, they rarely stepped out. There were some that were fun. I mean, Rob Shrimp, if he was fired up, he had some night. We had a few. I know one night in Peterborough, we had a bit of a challenge with him in the finals. Just he's a very outgoing, and he was very uncomfortable with sort of what happened in the game. And but he's got a ton of personality, and he's a great quote as well. So there's all different types of personality. The thing I think, Peter, you probably would say to this too. I remember Rick Nash was our first draft pick, the very first year. Peter, do you remember when he came in, how he did his interviews? I mean, he essentially looked at the floor. He was very, very, very shy. So to see him now, I mean, I listened to him the other day on a local radio station doing a morning hit, and he talks so eloquently now and articulate, and he's grown up. So you see that evolution. I mean, if I had shown you the video of us interviewing him for the draft the night before the draft, back when he was in Major Bantam, and then showed you a clip of him being interviewed yesterday, you would be fascinated with the growth. So I think a lot of them, they grow in confidence and comfort, and they learn we would teach them some words, to encourage them. Little things, they stick to phrases that sort of followed along. If you don't really know where to go, say some positive things and get out of there. But I also give credit to Mike Stubbs and Peter for helping them along the way. A lot of those kids, while I was there, both those guys helped these kids. They taught them how to interview. And we had a lot of guys like yourself, Ryan, that covered, and you weren't looking to ruin their day. You were trying to help them tell their story. And I think you as media played a role in their development, and I think that was a big part of their growth. And as they moved along to whatever career they went to next, I mean, I watched Brett Walichka on with you guys, and he's a good example. I mean, he learned his media, his interview stuff from doing interviews locally with all the local media in town. So
Yeah.
Now you mentioned obviously you get to Chicago. It's been a number of years now, sort of thing. How much is it been an enjoyment factor? Because there's been obviously some progress, as you mentioned. You go from being a part-time scout, an amateur scout. Now you're kind of heading up the eastern side of things too. How has the progression kind of gone through? Is it the same process as before? You start with small steps and then kind of gain trust and then move forward again.
yeah, for sure. I think it's very similar. I think the organizations are similar in the sense that, the Hunters own the London Knights and treat it like a family business, and they're involved and care a great deal. And same in Chicago, the Wirtz family, Rocky Wirtz and Danny Wirtz, who run our team, are a family. They've owned it for a long time, and they treat their employees with a lot of respect, and they really, they have a great organization. And then our leadership group of, Stan Bowman and Al McIsaac and Mark Kelly and all the people that work on the hockey side, they give us latitude to do our jobs, but they also challenge us and push us to make sure the evolution from part-time to full-time to a little bit more responsibility is great. I mean, I've learned an awful lot along the way. I think, obviously in this job in scouting, you have to find players. And I always say that, if you have players that are on the team, you're going to have an easier day just being confident in sort of what you're contributing. And I've been fortunate to have, players from the OHL like Andrew Shaw, Brandon Saad, Ryan Hartman. We've had players that have moved along and been a part of things, and that makes life a little bit easier because you feel like you're a part of what's happening and what's going on with the team. And in other cases, you're helping build towards consensus. So we have a lot of players, rookies on our team this year like Philip Kurashev and Nick Baudin that have played in the Quebec League while I've been, and I work with our guys in the Quebec League together and helping promote those players. So you take great pride in the players joining the organization, and that evolution has been really good. It's been fun to, continue along, and it was fun when we were winning, and now we're in the process of recouping and getting back and trying to win again. So
yeah, but you're right up there though. The Hawks, you're right. You're right there. You're only a couple of points away from first place.
Yeah, you know what, we've played really well. We got a young group of guys. We've introduced probably more rookies to the lineup than any team in the NHL, I think, this year, or as many as anybody. And we're finding out we've got a lot of young guys that just need a little bit of experience and opportunity, and they've run with it. And I know the one thing I will say is Duncan Keith, Patrick Kane, and Jeremy Colleton, our coach, play a huge role in the success of these young guys.
Yeah.
Because they've been accepting. I mean, Duncan Keith is like a father figure to all the young defensemen. We've got a handful of guys that are under 25, and he's 37, and he's like a player coach for them. He's in a Hall of Fame career himself. And then he takes on a leadership role to mentor an Ian Mitchell or a Nick Baudin or Nikita Zadorov or Adam Boquist, these young guys that we have around him. He's helping them. And then up front, Patrick Kane, I mean, he's in the top 5 scoring. Obviously, a local connection. He and I were together in London. I mean, he's coming up on his 1,000th game, and he still plays the game like he's 22 years old. He loves it. He's 5th in scoring or 4th in scoring in the NHL, and he mentored the group up front. He's taught Alex DeBrincat and another OHL guy that I was involved in. He's taught Alex. He's taught Philip Kurashev and P. Suter and these young guys. He's taught them how to adjust and be comfortable in the league, and he's been a great mentor. So it's been fun to watch, and that's why we've been successful.
Jimmy, let's bring it up to date. What do you do on a day-to-day basis? Your broken leg notwithstanding.
Right now, I suffered injury back in January, but yeah, I'm on the mend, which thankfully during now, normal season, I would be going to games, as you know, as you guys would be too on a Friday night. But for now, we're watching the games that are on TV. In Canada, we can't go to anything live. There's no games. I know they're starting this weekend out west. They'll be able to play. But basically, during the day, I watch games probably 3-4 hours a day. I watch a couple games a day from either Europe or the Quebec League or around the world, some games in the US. We have a lot of great streaming sites that we have services with that we can download the games and watch them. So we get games from last night and we'll watch them. I'll watch games each day. So I do that basically every day. I work a couple hours a day watching games, networking, talking to kids, talking to coaches, obviously working the phones a little bit to find out when or if the OHL is coming back and some of that stuff. But it's acquiring information. You're interviewing players, you're talking to your staff, you're talking about, we have meetings on a regular basis, but for the most part, it's, I would say 3 to 4 hours a day of watching games and then working the phones. So
when does the, obviously, there's so many aspects, especially when you're involved with a team, when the team's in season playing well, but it's one of those things. When does things really pick up towards, the draft is obviously the big aspect for you guys, sort of thing. It's not a matter of the night before you go, who do we want? It's a whole year-round process. But when do things really kind of pick up and you start kind of, there's always talk of making the lists and so on and so forth.
And normally through the year we meet regularly. I mean, in a regular year, do you want to talk about this year or a regular year? Which would you prefer?
Let's go regular year first, then we'll talk this year.
Regular year, we would begin to start watching games, and obviously August with the Lincoln tournament, we would watch and identify players, and then around November, December, we would be talking about those players to the group and introducing them, and then we would begin a little bit of crossover in December, through the rest of the season, crossing over. We'd meet in January, have a big meeting, usually in a warm spot like Florida, or we've gone a number of different places, have a meeting to go through the entire world. We go through all the regions, work towards a list, and not really specific in order, but just talk about players we like, and then narrow down after January until May. We really narrow down the players that we really want to concentrate on. And then closer to May, we have another meeting, sort of get our list kind of organized. And then we tweak it and tweak it and tweak it as we get close. We arrive in the draft city typically 5 days before. We discuss and debate, and that's when we really hammer out sort of the final order. And then come Friday when the draft arrives, we've pretty much worked on all the information, and at that point we then go and take part in the draft. So a lot of the work is done. We don't do a lot of discussing at the draft table. A lot of it takes place, sort of preparing it as we lead up to that time. But it's basically a year-long process. We get rid of one draft, and the next day we start on information for the next year, and we work towards a consensus, and we pick those 7 guys in June or July or whenever that draft is. So,
how about this year?
This year, it's been a lot. It's actually technology, like we're doing right now. We've talked a lot. We have regular Zoom calls as a staff from around the world. We have a set time, and we talk. We've interviewed players. We talk a lot, so on a weekly basis. We continue to watch games. Some guys can go to, depending on the country, they can go to live games in some places. The rest of us, we are assigned players we watch, from our region, and we continue to, the same way you would do it live, but we do it virtually, by watching the games on video and then discussing them in the meetings. And we work towards players that we like and continue to promote and talk. And as we get close to the draft, same thing, we'll have virtual meetings where we will put our list together, and at such time we can get together, we will get together and do it live. But I think until then, basically everything will be virtual until we can get together. So,
Jim, I sat in on some junior draft meetings, and there was always, we want this guy first. No, we can't take him. We got to get him. We got to get the other guy. Is the same thing in pro? Does everyone have an opinion on who should be the top man?
Well, we have a discussion. I would say we always say we want to work towards a consensus. We don't want just wild, hey, this is my guy. And if you haven't seen the player, like if I said to you, what did you think of the game last night, and you didn't watch it, you can't really vote, right? So if you're going to, our vice president of amateur scouting, McKellar, does a really good job of steering the discussion towards people who have seen the players, so that we work towards a consensus decision for the organization. And we find when that happens, it can really, we work towards getting the best player. It's not a lot of wild, hey, you're, my guy, your guy. It's not that sort of discussion. It's, what do we like about this player? What do we like better about this player over this player? Who's seen him? Stayed a little bit of direction, but it's not too wild. It's sort of organized. And Mark, as I say, does a great job of steering it and discussing the players, so we get to the order that we want.
It's a little more orderly than the junior draft used to be.
Yeah, I know.
With uni there.
A few of the ones, we had some, it's sort of, there's a larger group, I guess I would say, in the NHL. I mean, in the room when we're discussing, there's a larger group. So and there's more players because you're around the world.
Yeah.
And in not all cases have you seen every single player. So you have to make sure that if 5 of the 15 people have seen both players, they have to vote. The other 10, they can vote for one or give support for one, but they can't vote one over the other. So you have to make sure you have some good discussion and work towards a proper consensus at the end. And I think we do that. There's
an awful lot at stake, isn't there, Jimmy? I mean, this is the future, your hockey club you're talking about.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of time and resources invested in finding out about the players and then having the player. I mean, you think we draft 7 players a year. We only have 22 players on a roster and 23 maybe on our roster in the NHL. We got another 23 playing in Rockford in the American Hockey League, and then we've got a couple that are playing in the East Coast League, and then we have guys in junior and college around. So your reserve list is large. So to be able to, you have to make sure you have the information to end up with NHL players. You don't want to just draft 7 players and every 2 years you don't sign and you don't have any players. So you really have to, and that's where the players come from. There's not as many trades. The players come from the draft. So we spend a lot of time making sure that we do our background to find out about the players. So.
Now, obviously, Jim, it's one thing that you mentioned. Obviously, Patrick Kane, we're going, being a first overall. Those ones, I jokingly would say, would probably the easier ones for for your group. You know how good the kid is. You know where he's going to go. Is it kind of the competition element of it? It's that 3rd and 4th round kid. I remember how many times in the OHL that if we can get a 4th round kid that all of a sudden becomes a second line forward or a top 2D. Is that the kind of thing? And have you had those kids over the years where you've kind of gone to bat for a guy you've seen, and then all of a sudden it works out, and you kind of say, "See, that's why I liked him so much."
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, you try to make sure you're looking for players in all rounds, and I reference off the top about Andrew Shaw. He's a player that we drafted in the 5th round. My first year, we played them in the playoffs while I was working for London, and he played no one sound. And he's an example of a guy we drafted in the 5th round, and he went on and had a career. Well, that helps our team because our first round pick that year was Philip Deneau, and he's playing in Montreal. We've traded him, but he played in the NHL. We had Brandon Saad in the 2nd round, but those picks are a little bit easier and more of a group decision. The ones in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, like an Andrew Shaw, are a great example of a guy that they help your team get, as Peter said, a 4th or 5th round pick that plays like a 2nd round or a 2nd line winger. That really helps. And so Andrew Shaw is a good example. This year we drafted the kid Isaac Phillips in the 5th round. I'm hopeful. He's from Sudbury. He's playing in Rockford for us. Hopeful he can be one of those sort of hidden gems in the middle of the draft. We've had guys like Nick Jalmerson as an organization. Nick Jalmerson, Marcus Kruger, Philip Kurashev, who's on our team now. We drafted in the 4th round 2 years ago. Those kind of kids, they really augment the first rounders. As you said about Patrick Kane at the top, those are decisions that are often made at the highest level. The support for those later picks come from lower levels like myself, and it's important that we find some every year because we can't have just 1 out of 7 make it. We got to make sure we can get. If a good draft, we have 3 or 4 make it. We've done our jobs. So
who's at the top of your list right now, Jimmy?
I can't tell you, Peter. It's top secret, but there's a lot of good players. I mean, obviously it's hard with the OHL. They're not playing, and that's a challenge. So some of those kids, the top kids, would be kids that have gone over to Europe. Some of the guys like Brennan Ottman and Brant Clark and Mick Tavish and the Mayhew boy that plays in London. They've all gone and been able to show themselves a little bit. So they're certainly on the radar for the draft. I feel for the kids that haven't played. They've got young kids that haven't played yet. They will get hopefully an opportunity here. We're hoping that we're going to get good news. But at this stage, the world, there's some are playing, like Swedish juniors down, Finland is on and off, Quebec has been on and off, they're on again. Yeah. Russia has sort of been able to do it throughout. US has done pretty well of playing throughout. So a lot of those kids have risen up the charts, but I think at the end of the day, you have to take all the information for all the kids. And I think those OHL kids will be filtered back in if they can get playing, but either way, they'll go off stuff from last year as well.
How much would, as you mentioned, there's talk of potentially moving the draft or, adjusting, and everybody's got their own version of, what should be done for whatever purpose. What effect would changing the, I guess in reality, you've already had a shift of traditional timeline with the last year, with the draft being obviously later last year. Even if they move it at this point, does it have a big effect on what you guys are doing, or is it just you're keeping the same calendar and then you just wait for the time when the selections are actually to happen?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately our job is to gather information and work towards decision day. So if whenever that decision day is, we're ready to go. So we will continue to treat it no matter what. Last year was a little different. I mean, obviously we stopped in March. The draft got moved from June back to October. But when it moved, we continued to contact. I mean, obviously there was a bit of a lag maybe in July. You couldn't talk to. You were really ramping towards June. So when the combine was canceled, you had to readjust. There was some tweaks, but I guess the answer to be the most short and succinct on it, we were prepared whenever they give us the draft day, no matter what year it is. We work towards gathering information towards that day and continue to make calls and talk to people to help make that best decision, whether that is in June or July or in last year's case, October. So.
And just finally for me, Jimmy, it's just a scenario you mentioned. Obviously, involved in junior, moved from intern to director of public relations, assistant GM, now into the couple steps into the NHL. Kind of is there another end goal, another spot? Is the bucket list complete yet, or is there still a few more ticks you want to get to in the career?
Well, I think always in this career you want to continue to move up and have your voice be sort of heard and be a part of things. In my case, I'm comfortable as long as my opinion is valued and it's part of what we're doing on a daily basis. I'm not really hung up necessarily on job titles or on responsibilities. If I can be a help and they see a future for me to do something different, I would be happy to do it. I'd love to continue to evolve, and I think you always do. But no, I don't have a specific job that I have in mind. I just continue to be a part of the decision and the helping of the organization, I guess is the best way I would say it.
You sound very satisfied with your situation right now, Jim. They listen to you, obviously, because of kids like Andrew Shaw. I mean, he's got to be a plus for your club. But
yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate with Andrew Shaw and Alex DeBrincat, and those guys are big parts of our team over the years, and they give you confidence, but they also give the people making decisions confidence to listen to your information. And we've been fortunate. I will say, we've got a really cohesive group that we've been together a long time. We have had not a lot of turnover. We've had a good group and a group that challenges each other but believes in each other. And I think that all starts with Stan Bowman and Mark Kelly and Al McIsaac and the people that have been there over the time. They've really pushed and helped us be cohesive and challenge each other. We're comfortable, and I think that leads to success. So
sure does. Yeah, the way your team's playing now, it's going to be successful.
And it's got to feel pretty good for the fact that coming into the season, I mean, a lot of the preseason chatter was, with the difficulty of, not having Jonathan Taves in the lineup and, some younger bodies. There were people kind of saying, oh, we don't know if the Hawks are going to have that successful of a year. And then all of a sudden come out and play the way they do. That's got to be a pride factor too.
It's been fun to watch. And I think Jeremy Colleton and the coaching staff have done a great job of instilling confidence in these young guys to allow them to play and teaching them along the way. And I think, you guys know when you have youthful enthusiasm joining it, some veteran savvy with a Pat Kane or Duncan Keith, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, obviously we missed Jonathan Taves and Kirby Doc, and we've got a number of guys that have been injured or out of the lineup. But I think you've found out that the next man up, and we've found out we have a lot of good young guys that they're going to have a career in the league, and I think it's been great to watch them grow. But it's a credit to the coaches to really help them, but give them the opportunity and teach them. And it's been fun to watch. And every night I've watched more Chicago Blackhawks games on TV this year than I have probably any other year because we're home and they're playing. So between the bubble and the summer when there was no hockey, you could watch it every night. I've watched every game we've played since the bubble began because I'm home every night. And so that's been neat. And learning about the players at the NHL level, oftentimes, tonight we play a game. Well, I might be at a junior game. And then tomorrow night we might play again and I'd be at a junior game again. I might catch highlights. Now I get a better feel even for how the team is playing and how the young kids are adapting. So it's been good. I mean, there's been positives come out of sort of this negative situation that the whole world is going through.
And before I let you go, I said my last one, I lied. Do you have a good Pete James story from over the years?
Well, I don't know if I want to tell all the Pete James stories. All I can tell you is that I had great memories with Peter. We spent a lot of time at dinners, at pregame meals, at bus conversations, Peter. I think, we get out for, after we be on the road, there's a lot of downtime on the road. And I know Pete was a great advocate for the kids and very supportive, but he was also well liked by the staff. And So he was always included with our group. And I think my memories would be sitting around a table on the road, having just finished our pregame meal or a dinner or, out for chicken wings after a game, and just swapping stories about the league and about what's going on, and learning about families. And I think that would be what I would take away, Peter, is you and I had, 11 years of time together on the road and hanging out. And I'd say that is my biggest memory, Ryan, probably my time with Peter. They're fond. I mean, it could be breakfast where I sat with him and Mike Stubbs, or with, a couple of staff members, or it could be, late night chicken wings after the game, talking about what happened here and what happened. It was learning the people behind the jobs that was a lot of fun, and Peter for sure fits into that category for me.
Thank you very much. That the pleasure was mine, believe me. And Stubbsy, I know, is the same way. Because that's what we do. Get to know the people behind the scenes.
And one thing I'll say about Pete, which is kind of neat, which I loved, and he put a lot of time and research into his job. He comes from, Peter, you've been at the game for a long time. Your background is to learn and get there early. And I used to laugh that Pete was there before anyone else. He was early. He was on, I'm going to be prepared. If it was a 7:30 start, it wasn't uncommon to see Pete James Cotton, writing a few notes down at 4:00 in the afternoon in the media room. We'd wander down there and we'd be maybe setting up coffee, and he's already working on little notes and tidbits that he's going to have in his broadcast that night. And I think that attention to detail is probably a big part of your success, I would say, Pete. And it was fun to watch, but we did often laugh about how early and how prepared you were, and it paid off. It was good for you. So,
well, thank you very much again, Jim. This has been an awful lot of fun, and I hope you get along well with your injured leg. And say hello to Pam for me.
I will, for sure. Thanks, guys.